So both Eagles coordinators get coaching jobs, head coaching jobs.
Despite losing.
Despite losing. People wanted to overreact to the other night.
Yep.
Steichen first to the Colts. I mean, I thought it made sense, right? We have a small track record, I think, for Shane Steichen here. He took over play calling for Nick Sirianni in 2021. As much as I like to cite the fact that they didn't run the ball and then they did by about week 7 or 8 in 21, the Eagles, it did coincide with Shane Steichen calling the plays. He also was with the Chargers with Justin Herbert, rookie season. So there you see his little coaching career there and everything. So yeah, I think it's good. He was OC with Herbert in a year that, with an offensive coordinator, I think it's all about expectation and achieving something above expectation. And I think you have to say Shane Steichen's done that the last 3 years with Justin Herbert and Jalen Hurts under center.
He's another Louisville offensive assistant. Is that also Petrino? That's not.
That may have been Petrino back there in 2010.
That would be weird. Somehow both these coordinators started off with Petrino?
I don't remember offhand. But yeah, Jonathan Gannon got his start as an assistant at Louisville under Bobby Petrino, followed Bobby Petrino to the NFL with the Falcons.
So since these hires have been made, I've been kind of reading up, there's always like a inside the mechanism of how this thing happened, right? So kind of casting around, trying to glean some insights into how these various hires have been made. And I believe I have pinpointed the moment that Shane Steichen was given the job.
Really?
Would you like to hear it?
I would love to.
So this, I believe, I closed the article, but I think it's from this one. I think it's from a Zach Kiefer article in The Athletic. The line reads as thus. It was a lot like we talked before about how, what those 12-hour meetings look like, where they threw up a whole bunch of scenarios and blah, 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 and, down in distance, tried to get him to react, right? And the line reads, Steichen excelled, reminding one person in the room of what they used to hear from Peyton Manning. At which point, presumably, Jim Irsay is like, lock it in, done, sold, new coach, that's it.
This was him just reciting plays off the top of his head?
Reacting to down and distance, to situations, to whatever the scenario was that was thrown his way. He had answers.
Reminded him.
And as soon as he was reminded of Peyton Manning, the deal was done.
Yeah, that sounds right. That's about the time. Yeah, that's when you're sold.
We had a listener.
Get Peyton back in the building.
That reminds me, we had a listener essentially Photoshop up the scenario that we painted the other day, which was the interviews basically being 12 hours of Jim Irsay waxing the various candidates using Madden.
We were theorizing what's happening for the 12 hours.
Yeah.
Now we know Jeff Saturday didn't get the job. They may have been fishing for 12 hours. Who knows? But
I still think this was a lot. I mean, this is kind of what it sounded like.
Theoretically, they may have been. We said they could have been playing Madden, and going back to the 04 Colts. Let's get the 04 Colts out there, and run coaches through some scenario analysis.
That was sent to us by Ryan Euler, I believe. I assume that name is pronounced. He had a big question attached to it as well about on-off splits for offensive linemen, which frankly we're just not going to talk about today. Sadly, it's an interesting question, but we're not going to do it today. But I feel like we had to put up his Photoshop.
That was another one. Not to circle back to the Super Bowl, but another one of the things that Greg Olsen called that was just in the moment, spot on. That most people glossed over. When Andrew Wiley, when they did the Ring Around the Rosie deal, Andrew Wiley was an eligible receiver. So as the right tackle, if you become eligible, you can't go from an eligible receiver to an ineligible on the next play. It's a rule. So Lucas Niang came in for a play. So Kevin Burkhardt says, Lucas Niang's in at right tackle, and right off Olsen's like, yeah, you just can't be, he can't be ineligible and then eligible the next play, basically, or eligible then ineligible the next play. That's why Niang is in. Where most people, a lot of times you see announcers like, wow, there's a backup right tackle. What's going on? It's like, well, it's just a rule. This happens a lot when you do tackle eligible type stuff.
Did you see the report that he was going to have to take a pay cut from $10 million to $3 million as soon as Brady comes on board?
Yeah.
What kind of crap is that?
It's just the tier. It's just the system. It's like you get the number one guy is getting a lot, and the number two guy gets this, and the number three guy gets that. It's probably baked into your contract,
right?
But if we promote you to general manager, you'll be in a whole new pay band. It's a whole different pay.
Yeah, no, it should go up. But like, if you hire some other random, my pay shouldn't immediately get slashed by 75%.
If we dropped you to a lesser role,
No,
in a world where there's seven slots, they're all slotted. There's 7 slots.
If you sign
it's in his contract. They're not like, hey, we're gonna rip up your contract. It's got to be in his contract. If you're the number 2 guy, it's only $3 million.
If you sign a new starting right tackle, the guy that was there already doesn't immediately find his pay reduced by 75%, and shouldn't.
Yes,
that's the deal you signed.
NFL has a different contract. Like this wasn't like, hey, Greg, I know we signed you to $10 million, and that was signed for 3 years, but you're gonna have to now make 3. That's not what's implied there.
Yeah, but
what's implied there is if you're number 1, you make 10. If you're number 2, you make 3. And he signed his name to it.
Well, that's silly. He should renegotiate.
Well, yeah,
there should be
renegotiations.
renegotiations
He's worth way
done.
more than that. He's awesome. There's no way Brady's going to be better than Olsen.
Right. So it's ridiculous that his
is.
pay is getting reduced by that volume. By the way,
yes,
that's completely independent. That's completely independent of the fact that Brady's on like 35 a year, whatever it is.
Of course, that's why Olsen can only make 3. Because Brady's getting all the money.
Yeah, you got to free up that 7.
Brady helped the salary cap for 22 years. Not doing it anymore. Not doing it for Fox.
To get a fifth of the way to paying for Brady.
If Brady wants to win, maybe he'll only play for 20. Like Greg gets some money. If he wants Fox to win.
How does that help Brady?
Helps Fox. Team guy.
Team guy.
You want Fox to win. You want Fox to win the ratings war.
The ratings war.
Yeah, of course.
Right.
What are we talking about?
Gannon now.
Let's finish Steichen. There's one quote. Look, Nick Sirianni went out there, had one of the worst first press conferences you've ever seen. So we don't want to overrate first press conferences or statements, both positively or negatively, right? But Shane Steichen said, they said, what's your philosophy? Calling plays. He said he will call plays, by the way, which we also saw with Nathaniel Hackett and others. Maybe it's a challenge early on when you're trying to run the entire team and call plays. But Shane said, we're going to pass to score and run to win.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a good first day philosophy.
I mean, he also explained that sometimes the game plan goes out the window. Like he's gone into games thinking they're going to pass a ton. They ended up running the ball a lot. So he's going to be led by the game, the flow, not necessarily rigid to the game plan, which I think is good. The only other thing I think we need to comment about in this particular hiring was the press conference or the opening, the photo, Steichen there with the Colts helmet, Chris Ballard on his left, Jim Irsay on his right. And the only way I can describe the look on Jim Irsay's face is it's like he's trying to smile based solely on a written description of smiling. Like that's the only information he has on how to do this. That's literally the only way I can think of to describe what that face is.
Surely they caught him right when they told him to smile. Like he's not done with the smile yet.
It's mid assume the position.
Yeah. Or sometimes it's like the 8th picture in a set, and he's like, "Is this done yet?"
Right.
He's like, "Is this done?" He's talking. He's talking while trying to hold the smile.
Yeah.
And they caught him mid, like, "Get this over with," right? That's what he's doing.
Maybe.
It's the opposite.
I mean, look, that's why you always want video rather than still photos. You never know what moment you caught the guy in.
Like Adam Gase, crazy eyes.
Yes, although that was crazy. Whatever.
The
video didn't help that one.
The final thing on Steichen, though, too, I just thought he said pass to score, run to win. They ran the ball a ton in Philadelphia. It seems like he can do anything. They did the double cheek push. They ran the QB sneak stuff. They were at the cutting edge of edges, we'll say.
The cutting edge of edges.
Yes. That makes no sense.
No, it doesn't.
They're on the cutting edge offensively.
Cutting edge of the edge.
Yeah. Just cut that out. We'll just cut that out of the podcast. We edit things when I screw up. You'll never see it. They were on the cutting edge in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
So presumably he'll bring that to Indianapolis.
Gannon to Arizona. Or as you referred to him as the other guy.
The other guy, Jonathan Gannon. That was before the show, man. People don't know that.
I know.
The other guy.
But I just think it nicely encapsulates the hiring,
I went through his Wikipedia page just to get the
skinny?
Yeah, just to get the order of operations, right? When he was hired and all that stuff. And there's not a lot of information there, but clearly an Eagles fan went in and did like 2 paragraphs on the game the other night. It was like Gannon played soft coverages, negated his own pass rush, got carved up by Mahomes, wide open receivers, and all this stuff. That was the lasting impression. But, 2 years as defensive coordinator for the Eagles, and it's a zone-heavy team. They run the shell stuff. It's Fangio-esque. It's not necessarily the Fangio tree, but it's, a lot of we're gonna sit back and not give up big plays.
I think it's weird because I think it's actually a valid criticism, just not specific to that game. Like, I think that game is a bad game to highlight what is an overall trend in Gannon's philosophy, which does appear to be playing very soft and being too passive when it comes to coverage and pressure and all that kind of stuff, right? He doesn't like to blitz, doesn't like to kind of mix things up and get too aggressive. And he's improved in that area, but like year one, it was problematically in that area. Year two, it's been better, but it's still a little bit weak when you consider, like, okay, if you go anywhere that doesn't have the best pass rush in the NFL and a ton of good players on the back end, what does that look like?
Well, yeah, my question would be how much of that is just, this is what I have. I have inherited.
Right, but he was doing that
Eagles
before he
top
had
5
that.
pass rush. Yeah, he wasn't calling plays before Philly, though.
No. But early in the Philly tenure, he was doing, like, this year, he had the personnel where it makes sense.
They still had a top 5 pass rush last year, though. They still had a top 5 pass. They have never not had a top 5 pass rush. They still had Javon Hargrave. They had Fletcher Cox. They had Josh Sweat. Like, all those guys were on the team in 2021. They rushed the passer well. How many guys had? 4 guys had 30-plus pressures. Derek Barnett in there and everything. Milton Williams. So it wasn't as good as this year. It wasn't as deep when they added Hassan Reddick and everything. But it was still a good pass rush. So how much was that? I mean, it was really soft coverage that we saw. Then you get the dome factor.
The dome factor.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm a defensive coach, I don't know if I want to go coach in a dome.
Philadelphia had the number 11 pressure rate last year.
Yeah, in number 5 pass rush grade, which means more. Means more than pressure rate.
Uh-huh.
Pressure rate's tied to coverage. Pass rush grade is,
I don't know that
tied
they
less
necessarily
to
had a top 5 pass rush.
They did, because pass rush grade is a better indicator.
Yeah, it might be, but that puts them 5, and if it's generous by 1, they don't have a top 5 pass rush.
Anyway, so it's a fair point. Now you're going to Arizona,
who don't have a top 5
don't
pass
have
rush
any kind of
by
pass
any
rush.
measure.
So you have to adjust to your personnel. Just like I think Steichen is, I feel like Shane Steichen in Indianapolis has shown that he can adjust to his personnel. Right? It doesn't mean he's going to run Jonathan Taylor 30 times, but I'm sure Jonathan Taylor is going to be a big part of their rushing attack in Indy, even though they want to throw the ball. I'm curious to see what Gannon does in Arizona. It's a complete rebuild, though, man. It's a complete rebuild in Arizona from the ground up. I think they're looking to trade DeAndre Hopkins. They're looking to trade players. Kyler might be missing this year. We already said this job is an interesting one because it's such a long-term one. I don't think we're learning much about Jonathan Gannon this year, no matter what happens with Arizona.
Does this feel like this was Arizona's, top choice? Or does this feel like they ended up going quite far into the list before they hired somebody?
They probably went far into the list.
Because
it's after the Super Bowl.
Well, because they're both late, right? These are both sort of late hirings.
But sometimes you're waiting till after the Super Bowl. Like Eric Bieniemy's getting interviews right now because it's after the Super Bowl.
And it does. Is he? Aren't all the jobs filled?
OC in Washington.
Oh,
getting
wow.
A look, yeah.
So they're both late, they're both post Super Bowl, and we're getting a lot of process stories about the Colts one and how, it may have looked like they were just killing time until they hired Jeff Saturday, but actually this was a really exhaustive process that involved 50 candidates and extensive interviews and 12-hour marathon, blah, 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 blah. And then we ended up settling on Shane Steichen. And because Steichen, I think, was seen as, one of the top candidates this offseason anyway, collectively that's kind of tallying to, all right, this does appear to have been a sound process by the Colts and not the shambles that it looked like when we were just getting piecemeal interviews. It feels like we haven't sort of had that resolution with the Cardinals one, and maybe we're just lacking the process stories that paint the picture and the narrative, but this one feels a lot more like we asked a few people, they all said no, and now we went to number 8 on the list.
They were in on Sean Payton, right? They were in on did they get Kafka out there interviewing in Arizona?
I'm not sure. Which was critically, but they were also late to Lou Anarumo, right? Was involved in that one.
True.
But one of the elements about the Colts search is that they weren't ever, apparently, on the Sean Payton or the Jim Harbaugh stuff. Like, they were never going for the kind of Hollywood name
Right.
coach. They were only ever after, whatever the next looking guy or the next guy looked like.
I just have to say, I think we don't know, though. We don't know anything
Sure.
about this stuff, right?
why I
So
said there's a feel.
we spent 17 minutes on it. I think that's enough, because there's only so much we could say about head coaches. The determining factor will be how they lead others. It won't be it's probably not their play calling history. How they lead.
Leader of men. Just like Coach Saturday.
Got to be a leader of men.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe Saturday would have been good in a full-time job rather than part-time. We don't know.
Maybe. I think there's scant evidence to suggest that, but sure.
I mean, the lack of experience probably would have caught up. But, yeah, you got to lead. You got to put your whole program in. You got to get buy-in. I don't know if anybody would have predicted Nick Sirianni's in the Super Bowl in his second year. Like,
Sure.
We had no information about him. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But let me just say this. Jeffrey Lurie, Eagles owner, has hired some really good coaches through the years, including both coaches that were just going head-to-head in the Super Bowl the other day, right? 38% of the final 8 coaches were hired by Jeffrey Lurie. I think there's something to people who have a history of a good hiring process and maybe taking those people, right? Taking the people that have been hired by smart people type of thing.